All right, everyone. Everyone seems to be focused on, the fact that multiple U.S. cities are burning as looting, vandalistic thugs decide to rove through them and largely cheered on by half of the U.S. political complex. But there's something else going on, unfortunately, that warrants attention, which is that Ebola has returned to the Congo. Yes, the WHO unfortunately confirming they thought they had exhausted it, snuffed it out. It's come back. Now, will it go back to epidemic status and burn through another few thousand lives? Maybe, maybe not. It's impossible to tell. They did manage to get it largely corralled, which is to their benefit. The problem is it very close to escaped containment multiple times. For the first time, Ebola, in this latest epidemic, managed to hit significant metropolitan areas. I'm not talking about large towns. I'm talking about reasonably sized cities like Butembo. Butembo has a population, Kivu and all of these other places have significant populations. We're talking in the hundreds of thousands range. One city, I can't remember the name, got hit and it had almost 1 million people living in it. Butembo, I think, is about the size of Minneapolis by population, so keep that in mind. When a virus hits an area like that because of higher population density and movement and potentially regional or even international transit lines, planes, ships, and so forth, it gives you a considerable boost to the odds, the possibility that it spreads further. The problem is that so long as it's in this region in proximity to all these relatively large cities, which they have regional and even international airport. There are seaports not far away. It's near several international borders. The risk maintains that it will cross a border, that it will enter an even larger population pool. My biggest fear was that it would hit Lagos or Cairo during this particular epidemic. There's the possibility. Probably the former via the latter. It would probably hit Cairo or possibly Nairobi first. Those are major cities. Now, they're not made in the sense of, they're not like New York City, but at the same time, you got a place that has a large airport, population in the multiple millions. If something like Ebola, less transmissible than something like coronavirus, admittedly, but something that is capable of spreading person to person, hits an area that's got that high of a population density, especially in an area that's only semi-stable, and you have the possibility that you lack the ability to do contact tracing, you could be looking at millions of people dead. And the world largely ignored it. Only for a brief period did the world even talk about this particular Ebola epidemic. When we had the West African epidemic, which was far larger, people flipped out even fairly early on and thought, oh my God, the Red Death is here, we're all going to die. And it was very, there were funny memes at the time, you had like Ebola Chan and stuff, but people by and large didn't take it particularly seriously after a while, and people basically have been desensitized to Ebola. So there aren't as many resources, I think, right now being aimed at the situation. By and large, and the dishwasher's going, so keep that in mind, by and large, people aren't even aware there's been an Ebola epidemic in Congo. It got completely eclipsed by political news number 1 and by coronavirus number 2. Ebola is way deadlier than coronavirus. People by and large, again, don't even know that it's a thing. When they think of Ebola, they think of it oftentimes the 70s. There were multiple Ebola epidemics, significant ones. They'd wipe out villages and towns, especially in the Congo. Back then, I think the third largest Ebola outbreak that we've ever had was the 1972 or 3, I believe it was, Congo outbreak. And this is now the second largest, and the biggest was the West African outbreak, if I remember correctly. Could be that this one's eclipsed it, but I don't think that it did. Well, you've got a significant amount of dead, and now it's back. It's still there. That means that they have to put the same resources that they've been slowly withdrawing. They have to surge back on in, lock things down again. The other risk is that when something like this happens, people say, well, I thought it was gone. Oh my God, they get conspiracy theorists telling them basically that these people in the white suits are the ones spreading the disease. That's always an ever-present risk, too. We've seen that sort of hysteria as well with coronavirus. Oh my God, they're giving people coronavirus on purpose, and that can be a big problem when you're trying to fight a pandemic. My biggest worry, though, at all times, is that Ebola will do what it did in West Africa, and it'll mutate and become more transmissible. We now know, for example, there was a mutation in Ebola. In a small rural population, possibly animal-related, Ebola mutated. It became more resistant to environmental factors, more able to exist on surfaces. Of course, it's mainly droplet spread. Because of that fact, it spread further and faster in West Africa. We were very, very lucky in this world that an asymptomatic variant also mutated thereafter, fairly early on, and began inoculating people. That, plus the human element of quarantine, of education, hand washing and shit, managed to snuff that out. We got lucky. That was largely nature's doing. Humans tipped the balance, but largely that was nature self-limiting. Unfortunately, at some point in the future, we're going to see a disease that eclipses the Ebola outbreak, coronavirus, maybe even the Black Death. It's inevitable, especially since you have more hosts. The world is more populated today than it ever has been before. You can travel from one point in the world to another in 24 hours or less, literally around the entire globe from side to side. In such a scenario, we're one mutation away from losing 1 billion people. Maybe several billion people. Maybe the death toll approaches 50%. Maybe hits 90. What if rabies, I don't think it's likely since it's not mutation prone, which trust me, we're lucky on that one. What if it does randomly mutate, goes airborne? Yeah, well, basically, 99% of the world's population's fucked. At that point, better hope that you have a bunker because it'll be literally like a zombie apocalypse on steroids. And it won't be a fun one because, it'd be a very painful way to die. Oh, I got bitten. Yeah, I'm just going to blow my head off. It's better than the alternative, most people will say at that point. This sounds like something out of science fiction. It sounds hyperbolic, even fear-mongering, but it's not. It's funny. Again, you get called a conspiracy theorist and fearmonger, but then coronavirus practically ends world society as we know it. And we get opportunists talking about a new norm and we'll social distance forever, prepare for a masked future, which is bullshit, but the attempt is there, and these are the mainline elements that'll call you a conspiracy theorist if you say that Ebola is a threat. And these people freaked out. All of these people freaked out when the West African Ebola virus epidemic hit, and then before that, if you suggested that tropical disease could be problematic, by and large, you were ignored. You were on the weird side of YouTube, so to speak. Unfortunately, even most of you out there probably don't even know there's an active epidemic going on of this kind. Ebola is way more deadly than coronavirus. God save you, I suppose, if it decides to mutate and become that level of transmissible. It'd kill off 20-30% of the world's population. And of course, some of the nihilistic black pillars out there, we say like, ha, laugh about it. Okay, again, it's funny to meme, but, some of those people will be people that you like. Celebrity, musician you listen to, politician you would vote for, your friend, your mom, maybe you. That's the whole problem now, isn't it? Everyone feels like they're invincible until the trouble comes to their neighborhood. That's why all of these gated community liberals are cheering on the rioters who would very gladly mob their home. That's about all. Peace out.